Few foods capture the untamed spirit of the American frontier quite like bacon. From early pioneers trekking westward to cowboys fueling long cattle drives, salted pork strips were more than a comfort. They were survival. But how much of these bacon did settlers actually eat? In this video, we'll uncover the surprising role bacon played in daily life on the frontier and why it became an enduring symbol of the Old West. The amount of bacon consumed by frontier. In the early 19th century, survival on the American frontier was never guaranteed. Families packed wagons with what they thought might carry them across rivers, mountains, and months of uncertainty. Among flour sacks and coffee tins, one item stood out: bacon. It was more than food. It was a guarantee, a promise that when the game ran out and crops failed, there would still be something salty, smoky, and nourishing to put on the table. And the shocking thing here is that the level of consumption tells their story. For instance, soldiers stationed in frontier forts received nearly 12 ounces of pork or bacon every single day. That is close to a pound. And when stretched across a year, it added up to almost 240 pounds per man. The math may look mechanical, but for the soldier, it was life measured in strips and slabs. Bacon was not a luxury of the ration, it was the heartbeat of it. When you read the old ledgers, you see how often pork and bacon appear. Sometimes the terms blur, but the message is clear. Without bacon, the Army's diet fell apart. And that was not all. But before we go any further, if you're enjoying this and love stories about the Old West, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss an update. For families, the scale was different, but no less striking. Guides for the Oregon Trail advised emigrants to carry 100 to 150 pounds of bacon per adult. A family of 5 could easily leave Missouri with 400 or 500 pounds salted down, packed tight, and ready to be eaten over the 4 to 6 months it might take to reach Oregon. Imagine the wagon creaking forward, each pound of bacon not just weight, but insurance, counted alongside barrels of flour and coffee beans. Diaries often describe mornings when bacon grease was poured into cornbread batter, or when a slice of fatback simmered with beans, stretching flavor across an entire pot. And here comes the twist. If you compare those amounts to what modern Americans eat, the contrast is surprising. Today, the average person consumes about 18 pounds of bacon in a year. By frontier standards, that would barely last a single month. A settler family's yearly supply might run 500 to 700 pounds, 30 times what we now consider normal. That difference says something about need. On the frontier, bacon was not a weekend indulgence. It was the steady daily foundation of the diet. It also fits perfectly into the rhythm of frontier food culture. Cornmeal provided the bulk, beans carried protein, coffee gave warmth and energy, but bacon supplied the fat, the fuel that turned labor into survival. Without it, diets could collapse into monotony and malnutrition. With it, even simple meals had weight and comfort. That is why pioneers counted bacon first when planning supplies. Without it, no one was confident of making the journey. Of course, not every household had the same resources. Native peoples, trappers, and fur traders leaned more on wild game or pemmican. Some families raised their own hogs, curing pork in smokehouses once they settled. And yes, shortages happened. Bacon sometimes disappeared from forts or wagon trains when supply lines broke. But the very fact that shortages were recorded so sharply proves its importance. When bacon was missing, people noticed. Numbers, diaries, and ration books can only go so far. To imagine the role of bacon on the frontier is to picture a skillet over a campfire at dawn, smoke curling while men and women prepare for another day of hard travel. It is to hear a child writing in a diary about salt pork and johnny cake for breakfast, or a soldier remarking that rations had been cut, but that at least the bacon held out. Each entry, each pound, adds to a story of endurance. So, when we speak of bacon consumption in the 19th century, we are not talking about a garnish on a plate. We are talking about 200 pounds a year for a soldier, 500 pounds for a family, thousands of pounds moving west in wagon trains. We are talking about bacon as a unit of survival. And perhaps that is why, long after the frontier closed, bacon still carries a cultural weight far larger than its size. But how true are these numbers? Keep watching to find out. Evidence of bacon consumption. To fully understand how true those numbers were, we have to take a step into the records left behind by the people who lived, traveled, and fought on the frontier. This is because numbers alone can feel dry, but when we place them beside ration tables, wagon guides, and handwritten diaries, they come alive. This evidence shows that bacon was not a background item in the diet of the 19th century. It was the centerpiece. The evidence, drawn from both official accounts and personal voices, is overwhelming. The most precise records come from the U.S. Army. Back in the 19, soldiers had to be fed every day, in every season, often in isolated forts where crops could not be grown and fresh meat was unreliable. To solve this, the Army turned to bacon. The ration tables are clear. Each soldier was to receive around 12 ounces of pork or bacon daily. That comes to more than 20 pounds a month, or nearly 250 pounds a year for every man. It was not optional. Bacon was listed right alongside flour, beans, coffee, and sugar as a required ration. Letters from soldiers confirmed these numbers in a human way. Some men complained that the bacon was too salty or had gone bad in the barrel, but they still ate it because there was little else. Others wrote with relief when supply trains arrived, carrying fresh barrels of pork. In one account, a soldier noted that when bacon ran low, morale dropped sharply, even if other foods were still on hand. It was a reminder that for these men, bacon was more than protein. It was comfortable and consistent. Even emigrant guides from the 1840s and 1850s tell the same story in a civilian voice. Families preparing for the long journey west were instructed to pack certain foods in bulk. Flour, beans, coffee, and cornmeal made the list. But no item was recommended with such weight and certainty as bacon. Experienced travelers advised that each adult carry between 100 and 150 pounds of bacon for the trip. A family of 5 then could leave Missouri with nearly 500 pounds salted, smoked, and packed tightly in barrels or sacks. It sounds excessive until you remember the journey could take half a year, through stretches where no fresh meat was available. Bacon was the insurance policy against hunger. Diaries from the trail confirm this advice was followed. One emigrant wrote that his children ate bacon and cornbread almost every morning. Another complained bitterly when supplies ran low, noting that beans without pork fat were hardly worth cooking. A third described frying bacon at dusk, the smell drifting down the line of wagons and drawing hungry neighbors. These voices show bacon not as an occasional dish, but as a daily presence. It flavored food, lifted spirits, and marked the rhythm of the journey. And this is where it gets interesting. Stay tuned. Once families reached their destinations, bacon did not disappear. Settlers who built cabins or small farms continued to rely on it. Letters sent home often listed bacon among the staples of daily meals, reassuring loved ones that survival was possible in a hard land. Cookbooks printed in the mid-19th century also provide strong evidence. Many recipes for cornbread, beans, or simple gravies included bacon or bacon fat. The grease was too valuable to waste. It was saved in jars, used to fry potatoes, or stirred into bread dough. In this way, bacon stretched beyond slices on a plate. It became an ingredient that shaped entire meals. Personal stories add color to this picture. A Kansas homesteader joked in his diary that his family ate so much bacon that even the dog smelled like it. Another wrote that bacon was so constant on the table, he could not imagine a day without it. These small remarks, meant lightly, underline a larger truth. Bacon was part of daily identity. When you put all of this evidence together, the Army's ration books, the wagon guides, the diaries, and the cookbooks, the pattern is hard to ignore. Every group, whether soldier, traveler, or settler, leaned on bacon. It was counted carefully, issued regularly, and remembered in letters and journals. If bacon was there, people felt secure. If it was missing, they felt exposed. What is most striking is how many different voices tell the same story. Military officers cared about discipline and nutrition. Trail guides cared about survival. Families cared about comfort and habit. And yet, all of them agreed on this: bacon mattered. So how did bacon come to existence? Curious to find out? Stay tuned. Origin of bacon. The story of bacon preparation does not begin with covered wagons or remote forts, but with the way Americans learned to prepare pork long before westward expansion began. In the 17th and 18th centuries, hogs, popularly known as pigs, were among the most common animals in colonial America. They required little feed, could roam in the woods to forage for acorns and roots, and multiplied quickly. For families with small farms or limited resources, hogs provided an accessible source of meat. Out of this abundance came pork in many forms, but none proved more reliable for storage and travel than bacon. Preparation was seasonal. Families usually butchered hogs in late autumn, when the cold weather helped preserve the meat, and when corn harvests had fattened the animals. Strips of pork belly or side meat were rubbed with salt, sometimes with added spices like black pepper, cloves, or even molasses. After salting, the strips were either packed tightly in barrels or hung in smokehouses. Smoke from hickory, oak, applewood, or whatever hardwood was locally available gave the bacon both flavor and a preservative coating. Properly cured and smoked, it could last for months, sometimes longer. Recipes and household manuals from the early 19th century included exact instructions: how many days meat should stay in brine, how much salt to use, and how to tell if bacon was spoiled. The knowledge came from English and European traditions, but adapted to American conditions. Bacon in Virginia might taste different from bacon in Pennsylvania, simply because the woods used for smoking were different. However, as settlers moved westward, the preparation of bacon changed again. On the frontier, families did not always have the luxury of carefully built smokehouses or steady supplies of salt. They improvised with what they had. Logs and brush might serve as makeshift smoking racks. Prairie cottonwood or western oak replaced the applewood or hickory of the east. In regions where salt was scarce, settlers sometimes struggled to cure bacon properly, leading to meat that spoiled more quickly. Even storage methods shifted. In more settled areas, bacon was sealed in barrels layered with salt. On the trail, however, bacon was often wrapped in cloth, packed in wagons, or stored in canvas sacks. Travelers worried constantly about heat and dampness, both of which could ruin their supply. A well-prepared barrel of bacon could be a lifeline. A spoiled one could mean hunger. Traders also influenced preparation methods. River merchants shipping bacon south and west developed standard packing practices. Tightly salted sides of bacon stacked in barrels, often lined with ash or brine. These barrels were easier to ship long distances without spoiling. The result was that bacon became not only a household staple, but a commercial product with growing consistency. But it did not end there. The Army formalized bacon's importance. As early as 1802, U.S. military ration tables listed pork or bacon as a daily meat allowance, typically 12 ounces per soldier per day. This was not an occasional item, but the backbone of the ration system. For troops stationed at distant forts, bacon was practical. It survived transport, resisted spoilage better than beef, and could be cooked quickly. Records from frontier posts confirm the pattern. Supply shipments regularly included barrels of bacon, alongside flour, beans, and coffee. When bacon failed to arrive, soldiers complained. Other meats might be issued when cattle were available locally, but bacon was the most reliable. Its presence in ration tables across decades shows that it was considered indispensable to feeding the Army during expansion. Civilian immigrants relied on bacon in much the same way. The overland migrations of the 1840s and 1850s brought hundreds of families westward, and they packed bacon in bulk. Guidebooks published for immigrants gave precise recommendations. Lansford Hastings, in his Emigrant's Guide to Oregon and California, 1845, suggested 100 to 150 pounds of bacon per adult for the journey. Other manuals repeated similar numbers. Diaries confirm these guidelines were followed. Travelers recorded bacon as a daily food, fried in pans or boiled with beans. Sometimes it was eaten plain when no other food was at hand. Complaints about spoiled bacon appear often, showing how heavily families depended on it. When bacon went bad, the blow was serious because no other food could replace it easily on the trail. Once settlers established themselves, bacon continued to dominate household foodways. Hogs adapted well to frontier life, able to forage freely and withstand rough conditions. Compared to cattle, they required less land and less care. Many families raised hogs precisely because they could be turned into bacon that lasted through the winter. Autumn hog killings became community events. Families and neighbors worked together to butcher animals, cure meat, and hang bacon in smokehouses. These smokehouses, small wooden or stone structures, became a common sight across frontier homesteads. Household manuals from the period offered instructions on preventing spoilage and keeping insects away from curing meat, underscoring both the importance and the anxiety surrounding bacon preservation. In the kitchen, bacon was more than just a main dish. Bacon drippings were saved in jars and used to fry vegetables, enrich breads, or flavor stews. This thrift was born of necessity. Nothing could be wasted when food security was fragile. And here comes the deal breaker. Bacon was not only a household food, but a commercial product. Barrels of bacon traveled down the Ohio and Mississippi rivers, destined for towns and plantations farther south. Traders stocked bacon at posts along the Missouri and in the fur country, where trappers and workers bought it as a reliable staple. Packing methods became increasingly standardized for trade. Barrels of salted bacon were lined with ash or brine, stacked for shipment, and sealed to reduce air exposure. This commercial consistency allowed bacon to circulate widely, making it one of the most common traded meats in the expanding nation. Despite its durability, bacon was not immune to problems. Diaries and reports show that spoilage was a constant threat. Heat and moisture could ruin barrels. Families on the trail sometimes watched supplies rot before their eyes. Soldiers occasionally received reduced portions when supply lines failed. These accounts of absence reveal bacon's importance. People noticed and complained precisely because they relied on it so heavily. When bacon failed, it was more than an inconvenience. It was a real hardship. From colonial farms to emigrant wagons, from frontier forts to riverboats, bacon formed a continuous thread through the history of the American frontier. Its preparation methods shifted with environment and circumstance, different woods for smoking, different packing for storage, different levels of salt depending on availability. Yet through all these variations, bacon remained constant in its role. Other foods came and went depending on region and season. Corn might dominate in one household, wheat in another, game in yet another. But bacon was the common denominator. It was the food that could be salted, smoked, packed, and trusted. That consistency makes bacon one of the clearest markers of everyday life on the frontier, a food that was both ordinary and essential. Importance and legacy of bacon. Bacon was very important because it solved so many problems at once. The first reason bacon mattered was nutrition. Frontier life was demanding. Settlers walked for miles beside their wagons. Soldiers cut wood, dug earthworks, and marched in rough conditions. Farmers cleared land, built cabins, and tended animals. All of that work required steady fuel. So bacon was necessary because a single pound of bacon carried over 2,000 calories, much of it from fat. Fat was highly valued in the 19th century. It gave strength, kept people warmer in cold weather, and left them feeling full longer than bread or vegetables alone. Bacon also offered protein for muscle and recovery. This made it one of the most efficient foods to pack. It was small in size but dense in energy, which mattered when every pound in a wagon or pack had to count. The value didn't stop at the meat itself. Bacon drippings, the grease left in the pan, were saved and reused. Families fried beans, cornbread, or potatoes in it. Soldiers did the same at frontier forts. In a world before store-bought oils or butter were common, bacon grease was the everyday cooking medium. The second reason was ease of preparation. On the trail or at a remote fort, people had limited cookware and even less time. A campfire and a pan were often all they had. Bacon was quick. It can be fried in minutes, and it needs little water or seasoning, and could be eaten as it was. A strip of bacon turned a chunk of bread or a bowl of beans into a proper meal. Because it was cured, bacon was safer than fresh meat. It did not need elaborate butchering or immediate cooking. People could eat it fried, boiled, or even raw in emergencies. For immigrants already tired from walking all day, that convenience was invaluable. The third reason was reliability. Fresh meat spoiled within days unless animals were kept alive until slaughter. Fish and poultry could not be counted on in dry regions. Vegetables were seasonal. Bacon, by contrast, was durable. Salt and smoke gave it staying power. Properly packed in barrels, it could last for months on a wagon train or at a military outpost. This made bacon the most trusted food in a world full of uncertainty. Army quartermasters shipped barrels of it to remote forts, confident it would arrive edible. Emigrant handbooks insisted families bring 100 to 150 pounds per adult for the trip west. Even traders at frontier posts stocked it because trappers and travelers demanded it. Bacon could still go bad if barrels got wet or if salt was scarce, but compared to other foods, it spoiled far less often. A family that set out from Missouri in spring could count on their bacon lasting until they reached Oregon in autumn. Few other foods could make that claim. The last reason was cultural. Over time, bacon became more than survival food. It became a symbol. A full smokehouse meant a family was prepared for winter. A wagon stocked with bacon barrels signaled readiness for the road. Communities measured security by whether there was enough bacon in storage. That sense of security echoed into language. The phrase, "bring home the bacon," grew out of the idea that bacon was the marker of a household provided for. Folk humor, regional sayings, and even cookbooks used bacon as shorthand for plenty. Its role in everyday life on the frontier gave it a cultural weight that outlasted the frontier itself. Bacon was very important because it combined all these benefits. It fed people with dense calories. It saved time around the fire. It could be packed and trusted when other foods failed. It carried a taste of home into distant places. And it shaped culture by becoming a symbol of preparation and prosperity. No other food did all of these things at once. Beans gave protein but not fat. Bread filled stomachs, but spoiled faster than bacon grease lasted. Game meat was useful when available, but it could not be stored or shipped with the same certainty. Bacon was unique in its balance of practicality and comfort. That is why so many records, from army ration tables to emigrant guides, from soldiers' letters to pioneer cookbooks, circle back to bacon. It was not luxury food. It was everyday, dependable, and familiar. And in the hard world of the American frontier, that made bacon one of the most important foods of all. So, what do you think? Could you survive frontier life living on bacon, without a fridge, without modern tools? Let us know in the comments. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more raw, untold frontier stories. Click the next video. You'll love what's coming.